The red-eye flight from Chicago to Seattle sliced through the night at 37,000 feet, its first-class cabin, a cocoon of luxury now fractured by the relentless wail of an 8-month-old baby named Lily Harper. Her piercing cries cut through the hum of the Boeing 787 like a blade, each scream sharper than the last turning plush leather seats into battlegrounds of frayed nerves. For 2 hours the sound had ricocheted off the polished wood paneling, drowning out the clink of champagne flutes, and the soft jazz meant to soothe the elite. Passengers cocooned in their $5,000 seats shifted from polite discomfort to thinly veiled irritation, their sidelong glances sharp as daggers. Nathan Harper, tech mogul and Lily's single father, bounced her desperately in his arms. His tailored suit rumpled his face, etched with exhaustion. At 34, he was a man accustomed to commanding boardrooms, not cradling a screaming infant, and the weight of his inexperience bore down like the altitude outside. He'd tried everything. Bottles warmed to precise temperatures, a white noise app on his $2,000 phone, even a custom-designed baby carrier endorsed by parenting influencers. But Lily's tiny fists clenched tighter, her face crimson, her cries escalating into a symphony of distress that seemed to mock his wealth. Around him, the cabin pulsed with judgment. A hedge fund manager muttered about poor parenting, while a fashion exec adjusted her sleep mask with a theatrical sigh. Nathan's assistant, Ethan Brooks, a wiry 29-year-old in a crisp blazer, hovered nearby, whispering urgently about optics and brand damage. The last thing Harper Tech needed was a viral video of its CEO failing at fatherhood. Chief Flight Attendant Claire Dawson. Her smile as polished as her Navy uniform glided through the aisle with practiced grace, but her eyes betrayed a steely resolve to restore order. "Mr. Harper, we're doing our best to assist," she said, her voice smooth but firm, as she offered a warmed blanket that Lily promptly rejected with a wail. Claire's composure was a fortress, but cracks were forming. She'd already fielded complaints from 3 passengers demanding complimentary upgrades for their ruined experience. In the dim, crowded confines of economy class, 23-year-old Mia Thompson sat in seat 32B, her worn backpack tucked under her feet, her fingers clutching a creased letter confirming her scholarship interview at the University of Washington. The letter was her lifeline, a chance to escape the grind of her Chicago upbringing and pursue a degree in early childhood development. Her compression gloves, earned from 2 years working at a children's sensory center, lay forgotten in her lap. As she listened to Lily's cries, each one a puzzle piece her trained ear couldn't ignore. Unlike the first-class passengers, Mia didn't hear chaos. She heard a pattern swallowing irregularities, a specific pitch, the rhythm of kicking legs. She'd seen it before in her younger sister Ellie, who'd suffered sensory processing issues as a baby. Mia's family, scraping by in a South Side apartment, couldn't afford specialists, so she'd become the expert at 16, soothing Ellie through sleepless nights, while her mother, a community nurse, worked double shifts. Those years had taught her to read a child's distress like a medical chart, her hands instinctively tracing pressure points she'd learned from her mother's dog-eared notebook, a relic of home remedies and hard-won wisdom. Beside her, in seat 32A, sat Evelyn Carter, a 71-year-old retired preschool teacher with silver hair and eyes that carried decades of insight. Evelyn noticed Mia's gloves, the way her fingers twitched with each cry, as if mapping an invisible solution. "You know what's happening up there, don't you?" Evelyn whispered, her voice warm but probing, recognizing the weight of deferred dreams in Mia's tense posture. Mia nodded, her heart racing as she watched Nathan's silhouette through the burgundy curtain separating economy from first class. His broad shoulders slumped with each failed attempt to calm Lily, his movements frantic wrong for her condition. Mia's mind flashed to Ellie's episodes, Her arched back, her gasping cries, symptoms identical to Lily's. Nathan was holding her too tightly, swaying too fast, amplifying her sensory overload. The cabin lights flickered as the plane hit a pocket of turbulence, and Lily's cries spiked a desperate edge that made Mia's chest tighten. She knew the signs sensory dysregulation possibly tied to reflux or auditory overload conditions she'd managed with Ellie using techniques no parenting app could teach. Her mother's notebook, tucked in her backpack, held pages of handwritten notes, pressure points, rhythmic tapping, visual cues that had saved countless nights. Mia's fingers brushed the notebook's worn cover, her mother's voice echoing in her mind. Listen to the child, not the noise. But the divide between economy and first class loomed like a fortress wall, reinforced by Claire's vigilant patrols and the unspoken rules of privilege. Mia's scholarship interview was, in 14 hours, her one shot at a future beyond minimum wage jobs. Crossing that curtain meant risking everything: her anonymity, her composure, the chance to stay invisible in a world that rarely saw people like her. Yet Lily's cries grew sharper, each one a plea Mia couldn't ignore. Evelyn leaned closer, her weathered hand grazing Mia's. "Sometimes courage means stepping where you're not supposed to," she said, her voice carrying the weight of a life spent nurturing others. Mia's breath caught her pulse hammering as she stood, her scholarship letter crumpling in her sweaty palm. The curtain was just steps away, but it felt like a mile. Claire materialized instantly, her smile sharp as cut glass. "Miss First Class is for ticketed passengers only." She said, her tone polite but unyielding, her eyes scanning Mia's faded jeans and scuffed sneakers. Mia's voice trembled, barely audible over Lily's wails. "I think I can help the baby. I'm a nanny, and I've worked with kids who have sensory issues. I know those symptoms." Claire's smile didn't waver, but her words were surgical. "Our crew is trained for all passenger needs. Please return to your seat." Mia's heart sank, but Lily's cries shifted a choking gasp that Mia recognized as a precursor to distress escalation. She'd seen it with Ellie moments when seconds mattered. Passengers in first class were now openly filming, some muttering about incompetent staff, others demanding refunds. Nathan's face was a mask of despair, his eyes hollow, his confidence shattered. Mia saw the same terror she'd felt at 16, pacing her family's cramped living room, praying Ellie wouldn't need an ER visit they couldn't afford. Nathan's wealth hadn't spared him that fear. It had only isolated him further. Evelyn rose from her seat, her presence quiet but commanding, her retired teacher's badge glinting in the cabin light. "Mr. Harper," she called, bypassing Claire with the ease of someone who'd navigated bureaucracy for decades. "This young woman knows what your daughter needs. She's been reading those cries like a book I couldn't teach in 40 years." Nathan turned his gaze, meeting Mia's for a fleeting moment. His executive veneer was gone, replaced by a father's raw desperation. "You think you can help her?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Lily's screams punctuating each word. Mia nodded, her throat tight. "I've worked with kids like her. I know techniques for sensory regulation." Claire stepped forward, her voice sharp. "We have strict protocols," but Evelyn cut her off, handing Nathan her badge. "She's not guessing. She's trained in ways your protocols don't cover." Nathan hesitated, his eyes darting between Lily's flushed face and Mia's steady gaze. 2 hours of failure had stripped him bare, leaving only a father willing to try anything. "Okay," he said finally, his voice breaking. "But I'm watching every move." Mia stepped past the curtain, her heart pounding as first-class eyes turned to her, some curious, some hostile. Claire's jaw tightened, but she stepped back, her authority challenged in her own domain. Passengers leaned forward, phones poised, sensing a shift in the cabin's tense narrative. Mia's hands steadied as she approached Nathan, her voice soft but firm. Hold her upright against your chest like a koala. It helps with reflux. Nathan adjusted Lily, his movements clumsy but earnest, guided by Mia's calm instructions. She pulled her phone from her pocket, opening an app she'd used with Ellie, displaying simple hand signals, slow, deliberate motions to signal safe and calm. Kids like her get overwhelmed by sound. Mia explained, her voice gaining strength. Visual cues help. She demonstrated her fingers tracing patterns in the air, Lily's eyes tracking them with fleeting focus. "Can you dim the lights?" Mia asked Claire, who hesitated before complying, the cabin softening to a warm amber glow. Mia's hands found Lily's back, applying gentle pressure to specific points, her mother's techniques second nature. "These spots calm her breathing," she said, her voice steady despite the weight of every stare. Lily's screams faltered, replaced by hiccups, then a trembling whimper. The transformation was startling, like a storm breaking into calm. Nathan's eyes widened, a flicker of hope breaking through his exhaustion. "How did you—" he started, but a passenger's phone flashed, capturing the moment, and Claire's voice crackled over the intercom. "Please remain seated and maintain order." Ethan, Nathan's assistant, leaned in, whispering about containing the narrative. But Nathan ignored him, his focus on Lily, whose tiny chest rose and fell with easing breaths. Mia stepped back, her hands shaking now, the adrenaline fading. The cabin was quieter, but the tension lingered, a fragile truce. Passengers exchanged glances, some awed, others skeptical. Evelyn watched from the curtain's edge, her eyes shining with pride. Mia felt the weight of her mother's notebook in her backpack, its pages a silent guide through the chaos. She'd crossed the line, but the real test was coming. Lily's calm was temporary, and the cabin's fragile peace hung by a thread. As the plane droned on through the night, Mia knew this was only the beginning. The burgundy curtain separating economy from first class swayed slightly as the plane cruised at 37,000 feet, a flimsy barrier between two worlds that Mia Thompson had just breached. Her heart still pounded from her bold step into the elite cabin, where the air smelled of leather and privilege, and the eyes of the wealthy bored into her faded hoodie and scuffed sneakers. Lily Harper's cries had softened to whimpers under Mia's careful touch, but the tension in the first-class cabin was palpable, a coiled spring ready to snap. Nathan Harper, tech mogul and Lily's father, held his daughter in the koala position Mia had shown him, his broad shoulders tense, but his gaze fixed on her with a mix of gratitude and wariness. The cabin lights, dimmed at Mia's request, cast a warm amber glow, softening the harsh edges of the scene, but not the judgment in the air. Chief Flight Attendant Claire Dawson stood rigid in the aisle. Her pristine Navy uniform, a stark contrast to her barely concealed frustration. "Miss, you've assisted, but you need to return to your seat," Claire said, her voice clipped. Her smile, a thin veneer over authority, challenged. Aya's throat tightened, her scholarship letter, a crumpled weight in her pocket, reminding her of the stakes. Her interview in Seattle was less than 14 hours away, her one shot at a future beyond Chicago's South Side. But Lily's trembling breaths, so like her sister Ellie's, during sensory episodes, anchored her to the moment. She couldn't walk away, not yet. Claire's words hung heavy, drawing murmurs from the first-class passengers. A woman in a silk scarf whispered to her companion, "She's just a nanny. What does she know?" A man in a tailored suit tapped his phone, likely drafting a complaint about disruptions. Mia felt their stares like pinpricks, each one a reminder of her place, or lack thereof, in this world of wealth. But Evelyn Carter, The 71-year-old retired preschool teacher from economy stood firm at the curtain's edge, her silver hair catching the light. Her presence a quiet defiance. This young woman knows more than your protocols allow. Evelyn said, her voice steady, carrying the weight of 4 decades spent nurturing children. She turned to Nathan, her retired teacher's badge still in hand, a small but potent symbol of her credibility. Mr. Harper, I've watched her read your daughter's symptoms like a seasoned pediatrician. Give her a chance. Nathan's eyes flicked between Evelyn and Mia, his executive mask crumbling further under Lily's fragile calm. What else can you do? He asked Mia, his voice low, almost pleading. The question wasn't just about Lily, it was about him, a father drowning in his own inadequacy, haunted by the loss of his wife, Emily, who'd died a year ago in a car accident that still shadowed his every move. Mia took a deep breath, her hand steadying as she drew on the memory of her mother's notebook, its pages filled with techniques she'd used to soothe Ellie. She's still overstimulated, Mia said, her voice soft but clear. The cabin noise, the lights, even the way you're swaying, it's too much for her nervous system. She stepped closer, ignoring Claire's sharp intake of breath. Can I show you a tapping technique? It helps regulate breathing. Nathan nodded, his arms adjusting to keep Lily upright. Mia's fingers moved with practiced precision, lightly tapping specific points on Lily's back, along her spine, between her shoulder blades, mimicking the rhythm of a calm heartbeat. She'd learned this from her mother, who'd adapted it from community nursing, a method born of necessity, not textbooks. It's like a metronome for her body, Mia explained, her voice steady despite the eyes on her. It tells her brain she's safe. Lily's whimpers faded, her tiny body relaxing slightly, her eyes tracking Mia's hands as they moved in slow, deliberate signals, open palms, gentle waves, visual cues to anchor her. Nathan watched his brow furrowing not with doubt but with awe. Where did you learn this? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. From my mom, Mia said, her voice catching. She was a nurse, worked with kids no one else had time for. I helped with my sister who had episodes like Lily's. She didn't mention the sleepless nights, the hospital bills her family couldn't pay, or the way she'd memorized her mother's notebook after her death 2 years ago. The cabin was quieter now, the tension easing as Lily's breathing steadied, but Claire's presence loomed. This isn't an approved method, Claire said, her tone sharp, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. We have trained staff for emergencies. Before Mia could respond, a passenger, a middle-aged man with wire-rimmed glasses and a professor's air, spoke up from 3A. She's doing more than your staff managed in 2 hours, he said, his phone already recording the red light. A silent threat. Maybe you should listen. Claire's smile faltered, her eyes darting to Nathan, who ignored her, his focus on Mia. Keep going, he said, his voice firm. A CEO's command softened by a father's desperation. Mia nodded, her confidence growing. Can you sing to her? She asked Nathan. Something soft, repetitive. It doesn't have to be perfect, just steady. Nathan hesitated, his face flushing. I'm not much of a singer, he admitted, a rare crack in his polished exterior. Mia smiled faintly, pulling her phone from her pocket. I have something that might work. She opened an audio file, a folk lullaby her mother used to sing to Ellie, its melody simple but soothing, like a heartbeat set to music. The notes filled the cabin low and warm, and Mia began tapping Lily's back, in time with the rhythm guiding Nathan's hands to match. Follow the beat, she said. It's like you're rocking her heart to sleep. Nathan tried his movements, awkward at first, but he found the rhythm, his deep voice humming along, hesitant but earnest. Lily's eyes fluttered, her tiny hands unclenching a sign of trust that made Mia's chest ache with recognition. The cabin watched transfixed as the impossible began to happen. Lily's cries stopped, entirely replaced by soft, steady breaths. But the peace was fragile. A woman in 2C, her diamond earrings glinting, leaned forward, her voice dripping with skepticism. "Is this even safe? Who is this girl?" Her companion, a man in a cashmere sweater, nodded, his phone already streaming to social media with a caption. "Unqualified nanny disrupts first class." The video spread, comments piling up, some praising Mia's calm, others questioning her credentials, calling her an intruder in the elite space. Claire seized the moment, stepping closer to Nathan. "Sir, we can't allow untrained passengers to intervene. It's a liability." Her words were professional, but her tone carried a personal edge, as if Mia's presence threatened more than protocol. Evelyn, still standing at the curtain, bristled. "Liability," she said, her voice cutting through the cabin. "This child was suffering, and your protocols did nothing. Mia's the only one who's helped." The professor in 3A nodded, his phone still recording. "I'm posting this too," he said. "Let's see what the internet thinks of your protocols." Nathan's eyes met Mia's, a silent question passing between them. He was a man used to control, to data-driven decisions, yet here he was, trusting a stranger from economy class. "What's next?" he asked, ignoring Claire. Mia swallowed, her mind racing through her mother's techniques. "We need to keep her calm," she said. "The lullaby helps, but she's sensitive to movement. Stop swaying. Just hold her steady." Nathan froze his arms, adjusting his trust in Mia, growing despite the chaos around them. The cabin was a mix of awe and tension. Some passengers clapped softly, others whispered, their phones capturing every moment. Ethan, Nathan's assistant, hovered nearby, his phone buzzing with notifications as the video went viral. "Sir, we need to manage this," he whispered. "Hypertext stock is sensitive to public perception." Nathan waved him off, his focus on Lily, whose tiny chest rose and fell with a calm that felt like a miracle. Mia stepped back, her hands trembling now, the weight of the moment sinking in. She'd crossed a line she'd never dared before, stepping into a world that didn't want her, risking her future for a child she didn't know. Evelyn caught her eye, her nod a silent affirmation, but Claire's glare was unrelenting. "This isn't over," Claire said under her breath, her smile gone. The professor's video had already hit thousands of views, comments flooding in, some calling Mia a hero, others echoing Claire's doubts. Lily stirred, her eyes opening briefly, locking onto Mia's with a clarity that felt like a promise. Nathan's voice broke the silence, raw with emotion. "You said your mom taught you this?" he asked. Mia nodded, her throat tight. "She died 2 years ago. But she left me her notebook, her ways of helping kids like Lily." Nathan's eyes softened. A flicker of understanding passing between them, two people shaped by loss, bound by a child's need. The plane droned on the cabin, a fragile bubble of calm amidst a brewing storm. Mia knew this wasn't the end. Claire's authority was shaken, the passengers were divided, and the internet was watching. Lily's peace was a victory, but it was temporary, and the real test lay ahead. As Mia glanced at Evelyn, then back at Nathan, she felt the weight of her mother's notebook in her backpack, its pages a lifeline to a courage she was only beginning to understand. The curtain between economy and first class had parted, but the divide it represented was far from gone, and Mia stood at its edge, caught between fear and purpose. The Boeing 787 shuddered through a pocket of turbulence at 37,000 feet, its wings slicing the night sky between Chicago and Seattle. and the fragile peace in the first-class cabin shattered like glass. 8-month-old Lily Harper's cries erupted anew, sharper and more desperate, slicing through the amber glow of the dimmed lights. The brief calm Mia Thompson had brought with her tapping technique and folk lullaby evaporated, replaced by a fresh wave of tension that rippled from the plush leather seats of first class to the cramped rows of economy. Nathan Harper, tech mogul and Lily's father, clutched his daughter tighter, his face pale, his hands fumbling to replicate Mia's koala position. The confidence he'd briefly gained under her guidance crumbled under the weight of Lily's renewed distress, his eyes darting to Mia with a mix of hope and panic. In economy, Mia stood just beyond the burgundy curtain, her heart racing as she recognized the signs: Lily's arched back, her gasping sobs, the same sensory overload her sister Ellie had suffered years ago in their South Side apartment. The scholarship letter in her pocket felt heavier now, a reminder of the interview awaiting her in Seattle. But Lily's cries were a siren she couldn't ignore. The cabin was a pressure cooker, and the stakes had just skyrocketed. A viral video of Mia's intervention posted by the professor in Seat 3A was exploding online, amassing thousands of views and comments, some hailing her as a hero, others branding her an unqualified meddler. Chief Flight Attendant Claire Dawson's jaw was set, her authority fraying as passengers openly defied her, their phones glowing with social media feeds. Claire moved swiftly through the aisle, her navy uniform crisp despite the chaos, her voice cutting over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, please refrain from filming and return to your seats." Her words were futile. The cabin buzzed with whispers and flashing screens. A woman in 2C, her diamond earrings glinting, held up her phone, her live stream caption reading, "Nanny oversteps, in first class safety risk." The comment section was a battlefield. "She saved that baby." Clashed with, "Who let her in first class?" Nathan's assistant, Ethan Brooks, hovered near his boss, his phone buzzing with notifications from Harper Tech's PR team. "Sir, this is trending," Ethan whispered, his voice tight. "We need to control the narrative before it tanks our stock." Nathan barely heard him, his focus on Lily, whose cries escalated with each jolt of the plane. Mia stepped forward, her faded hoodie a stark contrast to the cabin's opulence, her hands steady despite the hostile stares. "Mr. Harper, it's the turbulence," she said, her voice calm but urgent. "It's overwhelming her sensory system. We need to try again." Claire intercepted her, her smile gone, her tone icy. "You've caused enough disruption. Return to economy now." Evelyn Carter, the 71-year-old retired preschool teacher, rose from her economy seat, her silver hair catching the cabin light like a beacon. "Disruption," she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of decades spent wrangling children and parents alike. "This young woman stopped that child's suffering when your crew couldn't. Step aside." Claire's eyes narrowed, but Evelyn's presence, bolstered by her teacher's badge, held weight. Passengers in first class shifted, some nodding in agreement, others clutching their phones tighter, ready to escalate the online storm. Mia ignored the tension, her focus on Lily. "Can you hold her steady again?" she asked Nathan, who nodded, his hands shaking as he adjusted Lily's position. Mia knelt beside him, her fingers resuming the tapping rhythm on Lily's back, matching the beat of the lullaby, still looping softly on her phone. "She needs consistency," Mia said. "The turbulence is like a sensory bomb for her. We have to ground her nervous system." She guided Nathan's hands, showing him the exact pressure points, 2 fingers above the spine, a gentle press near the shoulders. Lily's cries softened her tiny body, trembling less, but the plane lurched again, and her wails spiked, triggering a chorus of cries from two other babies in economy. The cabin erupted in chaos, a symphony of infant screams blending with passenger complaints. A man in 4B shouted, "Someone fix this," while a woman in economy waved her phone demanding compensation. Ethan grabbed Nathan's arm. "Sir, we should wait for a doctor on landing. This is a PR nightmare." Nathan's face was a mask of anguish, his eyes locked on Lily. "I can't wait," he said, his voice breaking. "She's in pain now." Mia's heart ached at his words, so like her mother's when Ellie's episodes had pushed their family to the brink. She remembered nights pacing their cramped apartment, her mother's notebook open her teenage hands, learning techniques no doctor had taught them because specialists were a luxury they couldn't afford. "Mr. Harper." Mia said, her voice steady, "You're doing fine. It's not about perfection. It's about staying calm for her." Nathan looked at her, his executive facade gone, replaced by a father's raw fear. "I lost my wife," he said, barely audible. "Emily, a year ago. I can't lose Lily, too." The confession hung between them, a bridge across their different worlds, and Mia saw her own grief, reflected her mother's death, the weight of raising Ellie alone. Evelyn stepped closer, her weathered hand resting on Mia's shoulder. "Tell him about the song," she said, her eyes kind but firm. Mia nodded, swallowing hard. "The lullaby I played, it's one my mom used for my sister. It mimics a heartbeat, helps regulate breathing. Can you hum it with me?" Nathan hesitated, his voice rusty from disuse, but he tried his deep hum, joining Mia's soft voice, the melody weaving through Lily's cries. Mia resumed her hand signals, slow, deliberate waves to distract Lily from the plane's jolts. "Keep your hands steady," she told Nathan, her fingers brushing his, briefly a fleeting contact that sent a jolt through her. Lily's cries faltered, her eyes tracking Mia's movements, her tiny chest slowing to match the lullaby's rhythm. The cabin watched breathless as the impossible unfolded again. Lily's wails became whimpers, then silence, her body relaxing against Nathan's chest. A soft clap broke out, led by the professor in 3A, whose phone captured every moment. "This is going viral," he said, his voice tinged with admiration. "You're a miracle worker." But the online storm was raging. The video of Mia's intervention had hit 50,000 views, with comments splitting sharply. "Heroic nanny saves baby" versus "untrained passenger risks child's safety." Claire's earlier dismissal of Mia, caught on another passenger's phone, was gaining traction with hashtags like #classist_crew trending. A woman in first class, her silk scarf now askew, stood up, her voice sharp. "This is unacceptable. Who verifies this girl's credentials?" Claire seized the opportunity, leaning toward Nathan. "Sir, we can't allow this to continue. It's against policy." But Nathan shook his head, his eyes on Lily, whose breathing was now steady. "She's helping my daughter," he said, his voice firm. "That's all that matters." Evelyn turned to the scarf woman, her tone calm but cutting. "I spent 40 years teaching kids with special needs. I gave up my dream of opening a school to raise my family, but I know expertise when I see it. This girl has it." Her words silenced the cabin passengers, exchanging glances, some lowering their phones in respect. The turbulence eased, but the social media storm didn't. Ethan showed Nathan his phone, where HarperTech's stock ticker flickered with early signs of volatility. "We need to issue a statement," Ethan urged, but Nathan ignored him, his focus on Mia. "How did you know all this?" he asked, his voice soft with wonder. Mia hesitated, her fingers brushing her backpack where her mother's notebook lay. "My sister Ellie had sensory issues. My mom taught me how to help her. We didn't have money for doctors, so we figured it out." Nathan's eyes softened, a shared understanding passing between them. "Emily used to sing that lullaby," he said, nodding at Mia's phone. "How did you know it?" Mia smiled faintly. "It's old, passed down. My mom said it was like a heartbeat kids could feel." The moment was intimate, a thread of connection in the chaos, but it was interrupted by Claire's sharp voice. "This is a safety issue," she said, addressing the cabin. "We'll handle this upon landing." The professor in 3A stood, his phone still recording. "I've posted Claire's comments online," he said, his voice steady. "The world's watching how you treat this young woman." The cabin erupted in murmurs, passengers checking their phones, finding the video of Claire's dismissive words. "She's just a nanny causing trouble." Comments poured in, praising Mia's compassion, condemning Claire's bias. A young couple in economy pushed past the curtain, their phones out, chanting, "Let her help." The support was overwhelming, but Mia felt exposed, her anonymity gone. Evelyn squeezed her hand. "You're not alone," she whispered. "You're doing what I wished I'd done standing up." Mia nodded, her resolve hardening. Lily stirred her eyes, meeting Mia's, a silent trust that steadied her. Nathan's voice broke through, raw with gratitude. "Thank you, Mia," he said, his eyes holding hers longer than necessary, a spark of something deeper flickering. The plane steadied, but the cabin remained electric, divided between those moved by Mia's actions and those clinging to protocol. Claire stood frozen, her face pale as her authority crumbled under the weight of public scrutiny. Mia's hands trembled, but her mother's notebook felt like armor, its wisdom grounding her. The online storm was far from over, and the real test was coming. Lily's calm was fragile, and the landing in Seattle loomed, bringing new challenges for Mia Nathan and the cabin caught in their story. The Boeing 787 descended smoothly towards Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, its cabin bathed in the soft, pre-dawn glow filtering through the windows. The chaos of the past hours had settled into a fragile calm, with 8-month-old Lily Harper sleeping peacefully in her father Nathan's arms, her tiny chest rising and falling in rhythm with his steady breathing. The first-class cabin, once a battleground of frayed nerves and clashing egos, now hummed with a quiet reverence, as if the passengers collectively exhaled after witnessing something profound. Mia Thompson, the 23-year-old from economy class who had silenced Lily's cries with techniques born of necessity, stood near the burgundy curtain, her heart still racing from the weight of her actions. Her scholarship letter, crumpled in her pocket, reminded her of the interview awaiting her in just 12 hours, a chance to escape her Chicago roots and build a future in early childhood development. But the eyes of the first-class passengers, some warm with admiration, others still skeptical, pinned her in place. Chief Flight Attendant Claire Dawson. Her polished facade, cracked by the viral video exposing her dismissive words, lingered in the aisle. Her face pale, but her posture softening. Evelyn Carter. The 71-year-old retired preschool teacher watched from economy, her silver hair glinting as she nodded at Mia with maternal pride. The plane's descent marked more than the end of a flight. It was the beginning of a transformation that would ripple far beyond the cabin. Nathan Harper, tech mogul and single father, looked at Mia with a gratitude that transcended his usual boardroom composure. "You didn't just help Lily," he said, his voice low, raw with emotion. "You showed me I could do this." His confession hung in the air, a bridge between their worlds, his of wealth and power, hers of struggle and resilience. Mia's cheeks flushed, her mind flashing to her mother's notebook, its pages of handwritten techniques, her lifeline through this ordeal. "I just did what I knew," she said softly, her voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "My mom taught me to listen to the child, not the noise." Nathan's eyes softened, a flicker of recognition passing between them. Two people shaped by loss. His wife Emily, gone a year ago in a car crash. Mia's mother, a community nurse, lost to illness 2 years prior. The cabin was quiet, but the online storm raged on with the professor's video of Mia's intervention nearing 100,000 views, comments flooding in. Hero Nanny saves the day. Alongside, why was she even in first class? Claire's recorded words. She's just a nanny causing trouble, had sparked outrage with hashtags like #SeeHerWorth trending. Claire approached Mia, her navy uniform no longer a shield, her voice trembling with rare vulnerability. "Miss Thompson," she said, her eyes meeting Mia's directly. "I was wrong. I let assumptions cloud my judgment, and I'm sorry. You showed us what real care looks like." The apology was quiet but sincere, a crack in the armor of a woman who'd spent a decade prioritizing protocol over people. Mia, surprised by her own calm, nodded. "Thank you," she said. "It takes courage to say that." The cabin watched passengers lowering their phones, some nodding in approval. The woman in 2C, her diamond earrings catching the light, stood and clapped softly, her earlier skepticism replaced by respect. "You've got my vote," she said, her voice carrying to economy, where others joined in a wave of applause, breaking the divide between cabins. Evelyn stepped forward, her weathered hand finding Mia's. "You didn't just help a baby," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You showed them what courage looks like when it's quiet." Nathan shifted Lily gently, his confidence returning, but transformed, no longer the rigid CEO, but a father learning to trust his instincts. "Mia," he said, his voice warm. "HarperTech is launching a sensory-friendly tech initiative for kids like Lily. We've been designing it wrong, top-down theoretical. We need someone like you, someone who's lived it." Mia's eyes widened, her breath catching. "I'm not qualified," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't have degrees," Evelyn interjected, her tone firm. "Child, I taught for 40 years, and I never saw a textbook teach what you did tonight. Experience is the highest credential." Nathan nodded, pulling a sleek device from his briefcase, a prototype sensory app he'd been developing. "This was Emily's idea," he said, his voice catching. "She wanted tech that actually helped families. Can you record your mom's lullaby on it? I think it'd be a start." Mia hesitated, then took the device, her fingers trembling as she recorded the folk tune, its melody weaving through the cabin like a promise. Evelyn reached into her purse, pulling out a delicate silver bracelet engraved with Lila Thompson RN, her mother's name. "This was my graduation gift from nursing school," Evelyn said, her eyes glistening. "I dreamed of opening a school for kids like your sister, but life got in the way. You're living the dream I couldn't. Wear this and keep going." Mia's throat tightened as she slipped the bracelet on its weight, a reminder of her mother's legacy. The cabin was silent, passengers watching, some wiping tears. The professor in 3A stood, his phone now off, his voice ringing with conviction. "I've sent your story to my contacts at the University of Washington," he said to Mia. "Your interview tomorrow. They'll know who you are." The couple from economy who'd chanted in her support pushed forward, offering a small stuffed bear for Lily. "You gave us hope," the woman said, her voice cracking. "Our son has sensory issues too." As the plane touched down in Seattle, the cabin erupted in applause, not just for Mia, but for the shared humanity that had unfolded. Claire, her composure regained, addressed the passengers. "Tonight, I learned that service isn't about rules. It's about seeing people," she said, her voice steady. "Miss Thompson, you taught us that." Nathan stood Lily, still asleep, and faced the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice carrying the natural command of a CEO, but softened by humility, "this young woman didn't just save my daughter. She reminded me what matters, heart, not perfection." He turned to Mia, his eyes shining. "I'm funding your scholarship fully, and I'd like you to consult for Harper Tech. We need your voice." Mia's heart raced, overwhelmed by the offer, by the bracelet, by the applause. I'd be honored," she said, her voice breaking her mother's notebook, a silent anchor in her backpack. 6 months later, Mia stood in a Seattle research lab, her white coat embroidered with "Mia Thompson, Sensory Specialist." Her mother's lullaby played softly from a Harper Tech device, now distributed to families across the country, helping children like Lily navigate sensory challenges. Nathan pushed Lily through a nearby park, her laughter mingling with his, a father transformed by trust and vulnerability. Evelyn visited weekly, her unfulfilled dreams alive in Mia's research, her bracelet a constant on Mia's wrist. Claire had transferred to family-focused flights. Her approach softened her lessons from that night, shaping every interaction. Mia's first published paper, signed with Evelyn's bracelet-inspired pen, outlined sensory techniques that were changing pediatric care, funded by Lily's Light Fund, a Harper Tech initiative supporting families in need. Nathan, now a friend as much as a collaborator, handed Mia a worn copy of The Connected Child, its pages marked with notes from Emily. Inside, he'd written, "For new beginnings from Lily and me, N." Beneath, in smaller script, "I hope this is a start for us, too." Mia's breath caught her eyes, meeting his, a spark of possibility igniting. Lily reached for Mia's finger, her tiny hand gripping tightly, sealing a bond forged in crisis. As Mia wrote in her mother's notebook, her voiceover echoed, "Some doors only open to trembling hands. The invisible become visible through small acts of courage. Reaching out when someone needs you, even when you're afraid." The final image showed Mia in her lab, Lily playing nearby, Nathan watching with quiet pride, and Seattle's skyline glowing beyond, a testament to compassion's power to cross divides. The lesson was clear. True expertise lies not in titles or wealth, but in the courage to act with empathy, to see beyond surfaces, and to trust lived experience. Mia's story urged others to step forward, to value their knowledge, and to believe that small acts of compassion can change lives, proving that the quietest voices often carry the loudest impact.